What is up, Schmelville? Welcome to the Meaning of Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about the deeper meanings of your favorite filmmakers' films. I am Ace, this is Ep.3, and we are very excited for this episode because we're going to be talking about the films of our British friend, our fellow Englishman, even though we're not English,
right.
Matthew Vaughn, who is known for his action films, but surprisingly, they always have a lot to say in his films. So I'm very excited to jump into that. But before we do, we want to read some of your comments from our previous episode, which was based on Denis Villeneuve. This guy makes a lot of great movies, and we read some of your comments, and we want to make sure and give you guys an opportunity to reach out to this podcast and give us your ideas, give us your thoughts, give us your favorite films, whatever you want to say to us. Make sure you let us know either on Schmelville or on Twitter, and we'll be on the lookout for that. So I know Ep.3 just pulled up a comment right now on the Schmelville post that we made about Denny. So, yeah, check it out, man.
Yeah, we have one comment here from Alex Hermy who says, Prisoners is one of my favorite movies of all time. When people ask me, what's a good movie to watch? My answer is usually, have you seen Prisoners? Fantastically shot and produced what I think is Hugh Jackman's best performance. Should have been nominated. Arrival is well on its way to becoming one of my favorite films, too. I think the thing that makes Denis stand out to me is how realistic all his characters are and how they react to the situations they are put into.
Yeah. I mean, again, I can't stop talking about how much I love Hugh Jackman. My family's in town over this weekend. I know I told you that, but I kept talking to my mom about how much I love Hugh Jackman. I'm like, this guy can sing, this guy can dance, this guy's an amazing actor. Again, when we talked about Darren Aronofsky, I thought his performance in The Fountain was just shattered me. I thought it was amazing in performance. And obviously what he does in Prisoners is so raw and realistic that I love that movie, man. It might be my favorite Denis film. It's such a toss-up sometimes, but Prisoners might be my favorite. Even though Arrival is probably a more ambitious and a more technically adept film, I guess you can say. I feel like Prisoners is one of those that it's just like, it just sucks me in a little bit more. But
yeah, I mean, I remember when the movie was released, there's like a hard campaign for a lot of people to try and get Hugh Jackman nominated for Prisoners.
It kind of went under the radar, if I remember correctly. A lot of people kind of just forgot about that film when it came out. Like,
yeah, I mean, it didn't do well box office wise.
No.
It didn't do like.
It neither did Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
Ooh, shots fired. Yeah, that movie bombed, dude. How much? Did 31 million?
31 million. They're expecting 50. That's unbelievable.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts me, dude. It hurts me on the inside. 31 million. That's I guess Finstock was right, man.
Yeah.
Tom Dagnino.
They put a lot of money into it.
Way too much money into it.
He was right about that.
He was, man. He was. Let's read another comment. Jen, shout out to Jen, who's always great. She says, thanks for the recommendation on Next Floor, Ep.3. I hadn't heard of that one, so I immediately checked it out once you mentioned it. Yeah, Next Floor. Thank you for that, Ep.3.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, like, that was just a short that I had seen. I was like, after me seeing like a lot of Denis Villeneuve movies, I started researching like his filmography, and like that one really stood out to me. And I'm glad people are checking it out now. I'm glad people are seeing it and talking about it, because I think shorts are an underappreciated art form.
They are.
And, you know, obviously you can't show them in theaters, and when you do have to see them, you have to buy them on iTunes or whatever. But I think that you can learn almost as much about story and storytelling and story structure as you can in a short than as you would in a feature. So I think that's what's really interesting. But I noticed a lot of people were commenting about us not talking about like Polytechnique.
Yeah, we got a lot of what are you talking about? Denny did some other movies too, and it's like we get it. We know that.
Yeah, I mean
they're great films, obviously.
Yeah, they're all great films, and you know, we wish we had more time to talk about it. I mean, we're kind of burning the clock like last time around.
We were.
Yeah, it's tough, you know, and I think this time around with Matthew Vaughn, I'm
excited about this episode.
Yeah.
And I know it's so weird to talk about our excitement for an episode when we haven't even done the episode yet.
Right.
But I'm excited because Matthew Vaughn, I mean, we're kind of we're switching over to the conversation now. Matthew Vaughn is one of those directors to me. Like I said before, I like how he's very unabashedly British. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like all his films are just super freaking British and super freaking like, you know, very made by Englishmen for Englishmen, and if they happen to do well in the U.S., then that's kind of how he got his popularity. But Matthew Vaughn's an interesting director. Like I said before, he's one who's known for his action and his kind of stylized sequences and his like really well done like style. Like when people hire Matthew Vaughn, they hire him not necessarily for story, but more for style over substance. I don't know. I don't want to say over substance, but over story, I guess you can say.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think about Matthew Vaughn, man? What do you like about him? What interests you about this filmmaker?
Well, I mean, he has an interesting blend of comedy, action, science fiction in some cases. When we're talking about movies like Stardust, this I guess is more fantasy, but a lot of whimsical elements that transcend a lot of different genres. That he always brings a consistent kind of narrative and style and flow to his movies, and he does that using like a lot of tricky camera work, fast moving, quick pans and zoom ins and pan ins and stuff like that. So he uses almost every trick in the book he can to engage in the audience and keep the audience's attention to progress the story as far as possible. And he obviously comes in like that kind of style comes in the same vein as people like a Guy Ritchie, Edgar Wright.
Other British filmmakers who
right,
make kind of fast, fun.
Yeah,
and all that. That's
exactly. And he wears his influences on his sleeves, so, and you see that in a lot of his movies. It's clear that the layer cake is influenced by like these like hardcore like drug movies, like crime movies, but it's also like the suaveness that like the British brings into it. And we see like Stardust is very much like a fantasy on it, like to the extreme, like almost like a parody, like almost. And he does like these interesting plays and commentaries on all of his films that we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, I like Matthew Vaughn because he's loud. I guess that's the best way to put it. He's a very loud director, and I kind of like his loudness. I like how he's very loud and just in your face and so like passionate about what he's saying, whatever he's saying, whatever he happens to be talking about, whatever the topic is. He's always a very loud, in your face director who doesn't really shy away from kind of towing the line between acceptable and towing the line between too much. He's that extra director.
Right,
how
right.
people say, man, that guy's extra. Yeah, that's Matthew Vaughn.
Yeah.
He's very extra, but I like it because he has that very heavy style that influences what he's trying to say. Let's just jump right into it. I say we're going to start in order of his films, and his first one is going to be Layer Cake, starring none other than James Bond himself, Mr. Daniel Craig, who happens to be my favorite James Bond and who I love as James Bond. And this is pre-Bond, too. This came out in 2004, I believe.
Yeah, 2004. And this was the movie that convinced the Bond producers to get him on board to do 007. And, in fact, Vaughn was originally attached to direct Casino Royale. But then he dropped out of the project, but they still held on to Daniel Craig from this movie. So,
dude, Daniel Craig is so freaking good.
Yeah.
Like, I can't stop. I was rewatching Casino Royale yesterday with my brother because it's one of our favorite films, like ever. Honestly, it's one of our favorite action films ever. And I can't get freaking Daniel Craig. He's just a very magnetic presence on screen. Like, obviously he has the piercing blue eyes that makes him look half crazy, half like super like suave.
Right.
Like he's the kind of guy who's like, I don't know if this guy is gonna be like offer to buy me a drink or stab me in the face. Like, that's that face he has. He has that kind of look to him.
Right.
It's that kind of like rugged British guy kind of look.
Like he's lived like a whole lifetime.
Yeah, like he can hang out with Eggsy and he can hang out with Colin Firth's character.
Right. Hey, that's a good one. That's nice.
But yeah, Layer Cake is it's also funny enough. It stars a very young looking Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy looks like a kid in this movie.
Right.
Looks like a child. And yeah, it has a great cast, actually. It has a ton of great British actors. And it's kind of his like drug trafficking, kind of like middleman, what takes place in the drug world kind of movie. And it's very, like I said before in the beginning, it's very British. It's like the British version of like a drug trafficking movie. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think it's great. Obviously, drugs are going to be a common theme in the Vaughn films. Lots of Vaughn's films talks about drugs, but this is his gangster-esque kind of like drug trafficking movie. What do you think about this movie? Because I actually really like it. It doesn't go too far with the comedy for me, because there's some of his movies that go a little too far with the comedy for me. This isn't one of them. I think he balances it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of all of his films, probably like the most grounded you're gonna see any of his filmography.
Great point.
Because this is more of like a straight up gangster movie. It kind of aligns like perfectly with like the crime movies that are coming out. Like, during that era. We were seeing like Lock, Stock, and Barrel, Snatch. In the American side, we're seeing that Nick Cage movie, Lord of War. I think that's what it's called. But the same kind of like open, like in City of God. It was like a lot of those kind of style movies that were coming out during that time. And I think he implemented a lot of those cliches and genres, like the cliches in the genre.
Sure.
But was able to like transcend them in like an interesting way. I mean, that opening shot is just one of the coolest, like,
it's really cool.
2 minutes, like I think I've ever experienced. And to me, this is personally like this, and we're gonna talk about Kick-Ass a little later. But those are my two favorite. These are my two favorite.
Yeah. I remember
films.
you told me that.
Yeah. It's like almost like a deconstructionist look of like, hey, here's what the middleman of this industry looks like.
I love that. I freaking love that, because that's kind of the whole theme around the movie is like the life of the middleman, right? In a drug world, it's like we have that mentality of what it looks like to be a drug kingpin, but what does it look like to be like a drug like prince pin? I don't know. Yeah. Someone who's in the middle of the drug trafficking world, someone who's not quite having both feet all the way submerged into the drug world. Mm-hmm. It's kind of having like 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of.
Right.
I mean, the main theme that I see running in that movie is obviously that. I also like the theme of like outsmarting your opponent. The whole concept of like this drug trafficking world isn't a world for dumb junkies or dumb people who just think like, hey, I want to make a lot of money and I want to be a gangster. Like that's something that he brings up a lot. His character in the movie, who by the way doesn't have a name, X. He keeps bringing up the concept of like, this is a smart man's business. This is a business. This isn't for people who just want to shoot up people. This is for people who want to make money and be smart about making their money and make sure they have a lot in their retirement fund. That's kind of like what the point of this is. I love that. And I also love how the concept of like, we see this a lot. We see this in Breaking Bad. We see this in other drug related TV shows and movies, is the concept of like submerging yourself deeper and deeper. Right. Where it's like one decision leads to another bad decision, leads to another decision where you're forced to kill, forced to do that, until eventually you're so submerged into it that you're not going to get out.
Yeah.
It's the way out is getting killed, and that's it. That's kind of the whole running theme of the movie as well, because Daniel Craig's character wants out and he can't get out no matter what he wants to do, because he's just stuck in this world.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting because, going back to the whole idea of, you have to be smarter than your opponent. You have to do, they kind of play a lot with it. I mean, the whole title of the movie is Layer Cake. So the whole idea is like there's different layers to, society. The ones at the bottom are just going to be the ones who consume, or the consumers are just the people who buy and, use these drugs. And then there's Daniel Craig at the middle, who just wants out, but there's no way for him to get out, because without the middleman, the top can't get back to the bottom, and obviously, like, both of the characters at the top are trying to screw him over, right? Like, we see him from the very beginning with, it's not the Duke, it's the, I guess Eddie.
Names are gonna be tough for me.
I mean,
is it Anthony? I know there's
something like that, but Jimmy. There we go.
Got you.
Jimmy tried to have him killed, or tried to have him arrested, and then the second guy tried to have him, tried to screw him out of like half of his money, from buying the pills. And I think overall it's just saying like, no matter how much somebody in the middle tries, like the top is always going to push them down as much as possible.
Sure.
And it's going to take extraordinary measures to even get up to that point. And I think that's what's on display here. And, he goes through all the steps of making it to the top. He outsmarts one guy. He kills the other guys. He gets the Serbians off of his tail.
Hardcore, by the way.
Yeah.
Hardcore exactly. Serbians.
Yeah. So it's just, but at the end, his only downfall is, taking another man's woman.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where its downfall is still somehow related to the business that he got into. I thought that was kind of interesting how he's like, I'm good, I'm done, I've done everything the right way, and even if you've done everything the right way, you've still had that one slip up.
Yeah, like loose thread.
That you didn't think was going to come back to bite you, but it did. I love the ending because the ending is very much like kind of weeding your way through competition. And I love that line. I think it's Tom Hardy who like raises a glass to him. He's like long live the king or something like that.
Right.
And I'm just like, damn, that's crazy how like you can go from being somewhere in the middle to at the top. Like legit, you're now the drug pin, you're now the kingpin, you're now the boss of everyone. And even then you're still gonna get out of the business bloody. It's not, you're never going to get your hands clean. You're always going to have blood on your hands.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's such an interesting movie because it does have a lot to say about the, we're going to talk about this a lot in his last film as well, but the legality of drugs, right?
Right.
How he talks about how it's the same thing as over-the-counter crap. It's the same thing as pain medication or any of those crap, but making it illegal makes it a business and makes it a bloody business versus making it legal. Right. I know Matthew Vaughn has a lot to say about that, and that's one of those films that he comments quite a bit on it as well. Right. I don't know if you have a last word on Layer Cake.
No, I mean, I definitely agree with that, and, you know, the whole idea of, like, being imprisoned for, like, drug offenses, like, scare a lot of these guys. Like, the whole idea of prison in general was, like...
at the beginning of the film, it's so great. The voiceover, he says, you're right, that scene when he says, like... When people who were like legit killers and rapists and gangsters were in the same amount of time in prison as people who sold crack or people who sold marijuana or something like that. Yeah. What he said, I forget, there's a line in the movie and I'm sure someone's going to correct me because that's what happens. But he says like, if you sell this much drugs, you'll be in prison this much time, which, by the way, is more than a rapist gets. When he said that, and he said it very bluntly, he didn't say it like in a comedic way. Yeah. I was like, damn. That's hardcore, dude. Yeah. Like raping someone, something that's considered some of the most offensive, most disgusting crime you can do versus selling like a little bit of drugs. And you're in the same amount of prison time. Yeah. And I was like, damn, that's deep. That's real deep.
And we see like all the characters like have their fears, like that, like the dude Morty, who's like, who spent 10 years because like his driver fell asleep or whatever. And, you know, and again, that plays into the whole concept of like you know, criminalization of the stuff. But then you also see in that same montage at the beginning, he's talking about like how these like killers and gangsters saw like these pieheads coming into jail and were like, oh, we're in the wrong business, you know, because, you know, everybody's feeding off of it. So it's a really interesting like layered thing, and you could tell it's a debut film. You know, you could tell it's his first movie because there's a lot of like flashy like moments, you know, and
the editing is kind of nuts too. I love the editing. To be honest,
no, I mean, it's great. I think I say that in a positive way. Like it being his first film is in like you could tell like he was showing that he has something to prove, and I think he succeeded on like all levels. Yeah, with that, so.
Yeah. My last word too is kind of going off of your point because you always bring up great points, RB3, and I'm not joking. You said something really cool, kind of like that the concept of like bad guys meeting drug people or potheads in prison and kind of taking that concept and criminalizing it even more. Kind of like the concept of like, if you criminalize one thing and put it on the same playing field as like killing, how those two intersect, not necessarily by, because they're the same thing, but mainly because they're kind of feeding off of each other. Right. Right. So what happens when the killer meets the drug dealer, then you get the drug trafficking killers or the you know, the sicarios, the cartels, the et cetera, et cetera. It grows exponentially because when one business and criminality grows in the other, right? Whereas if you bring down the criminality of drugs, how much will the violence go down? Right? Right. I don't know. It's just a concept there, but it's very interesting that what Matthew Vaughn has to say, and I enjoyed Layer Cake quite a bit. Let's move on to Stardust. This movie, like you said before, is pretty crazy. It's a pretty intense fantasy movie, starring my boy
Charlie
Daredevil,
Cox, right?
The Daredevil, right. As well as Claire Danes, Sienna Miller, Ian McKellen
doing the narration. It has a pretty stacked cast. Robert De Niro.
This cast is super stacked. This is a super stacked. De Niro.
Yeah.
Damn.
Michelle Pfeiffer playing the witch. Like
this is it's a very stacked cast. Man. I want to hear your thoughts about this movie because it's been a while for me, and I know this one came out in 2007, and it's it's an out there movie for sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, it's a little tough for me because I'm just not. I've never been I've never adapted to a lot of the fantasy iconography that's been out over, forever. Like I love Lord of the Rings, but beyond that, a lot of the fantasy genre just doesn't like adapt to me well. I can see the appeal, obviously things like Princess Bride and Chronicles of Narnia play big influences onto this film, but I just never really got into like that kind of material. So watching this movie is interesting because it's almost like a parody of that stuff, which I think might work to its advantage. Like in terms of me liking it, at least, like it has all of the tropes. You see all of the cliches of the adventure, the hero's journey, the call to action, all this different stuff. And I think at the end of the day, while it's not necessarily parodying the fantasy genre, is kind of doing like a nice little fresh touch on it. So I think it's cool. It's not one of my favorite Vaughn films.
Yeah.
And it kind of flew under the radar when it came out. It still kind of flies under the radar today, even though like it's kind of built like a cult following in a lot of ways. But it's interesting. I think it's an interesting piece in his filmography.
Yeah, it's one of those things where taking a look back at, and again, it's going to be it's going to be a theme in this podcast, and especially in this episode, is a theme of like where you come from. Because I do feel like what I said in the beginning of this is the fact that Matthew Vaughn's very unabashedly British, and very, in his roots, very in his Englishman kind of ways. And it's crazy how so many stories that we pass on in Hollywood today, we pass them on through the Hollywood films, but it's crazy how so much art and so much of these kind of fantasy stories that we grow up with come from England, come from that kind of field, come from,
like definitely Europe, like
European kind of stories and these like fairy tales, right? For example, fairy tales, or watching a show like American Gods, where it's like fairies and leprechauns and all this stuff. It comes from that, English kind of tradition. And it's crazy how this is kind of Matthew Vaughn's version of bringing those fantastical elements to life in a different kind of way. Like you said before, almost like a parody kind of way with the way the script is dealt with. And it's very interesting for sure. Like you said before, it's definitely not one of my favorites as well. I love Charlie Cox.
Yeah.
I think he's great. And I think he's one of those actors that doesn't get a lot of credit. I don't know. I just think he's a great actor. That's the thing that stands out the most to me. And also, like I said before, it's like bringing in Matthew Vaughn's perspective on a fantasy genre, because something that's going to be interesting when we keep going through his filmography is his interpretation of genres, right? Whether it be the superhero genre, the crime genre, or in this case, the fantasy genre.
Right.
So I think that's always an interesting one for sure. And that's mainly what I want to say about it.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, I think, with the whole idea of it being like related to his perspective, because we see it in this movie. It's about the young guy Tristan, who is trying to, who's like at the bottom. He's like a peasant basically, but he's trying to impress like upscale like Victoria. So in order to do that, he journeys across the country to find a fallen star. I think that's like a interesting twist on like this guy. Again, we're talking about like the idea of class and society here. Same with Layer Cake. Somebody from the bottom trying to climb up in the hierarchy, and how he's dealing with like the difficulties that come with that.
Sure, and kind of like the whole, what does it take to reach your way to like a higher class system, or is it worth reaching, to get that high? Are you still the same person you were before? Yeah. That's something that always comes up in Matthew Vaughn's films, especially with, I think all his films, to be honest, but especially with Kingsman, which we'll get into later.
And then and he has a good excuse me, there's a good moment in this film where he has to try and cross over the wall, like this old wall that divides like both sides of the land, but in trying to cross the wall, there's like this old dude, like this 97-year-old guy who just like kicks his butt, and it's like, oh, what, and he comes home to his father, and it's like, oh, what happened to you? It's like, oh, the old man beat me up. It's like, isn't he 97? It's like, well, you had plenty of time to practice. And I think all of that speaks to like the idea of like these old traditions kind of holding back like young people and how they feel about that. and how that's kind of almost restricting him from getting to see his mother again, you know. So I don't know. It's a lot of interesting like little fantasy plays that it goes on, but has some like real life connotations to it, I think too. So
Yeah, that's what's great about Matthew Vaughn is that he takes those and he always, like I said before, he always has something to say. Like
Yeah.
it really is. We can get lost in the fantasticalness and the special effects and in all the action or whatever, but at the core of it, there's something deeper. And I love when filmmakers can do that, when they can take a genre and be like, this is a genre film, but it has a lot more than a genre typical messaging. It's got something a little bit deeper, or it's something a little bit more poignant, I guess we can say.
right.
Cool. Let's move on to another one of his like parody type films, which is Kick-Ass.
Yes.
This is probably your favorite Matthew Vaughn film,
Yeah.
if I'm not putting words in your mouth. But Kick-Ass is one of those films where, I mean, what year did it come out? 2010,
yeah.
which is a ton of superhero movies are coming out by then, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many superhero movies. The market of Hollywood is flooded by them. And it's turning that... obviously, this is a Mark Millar comic that it's based on, which we see it'll come up a little bit more too. Mark Millar,
Millar, yeah.
he is going to be a constant theme, I think, in Matthew Vaughn's films, because we'll see that he comes up a little bit more as well. But yeah, so basically, this is his kind of almost parody of a superhero genre, and it's almost like a commentary on the movies that are coming out then, which is all these like big superhero movies from Marvel and from DC, obviously. And yeah, this one definitely has a lot to say from the very opening shot of the movie.
Right.
But what do you think about this movie, man? What do you like it so much? Because I know you enjoyed this one quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, for in terms of like my favorite superhero movie of all time, I probably say The Dark Knight, right? But in terms of the one I think that I've watched the most is probably Kick-Ass. Like I have this movie on iTunes, and just like I just run it at night sometimes when I just need to like watch something as I go to sleep or whatever. But to me, it's like it's a great film. There's some things that holds it back from being perfect, but I think overall, like the way it tells the story of like this nerd who's like coming from high school, like didn't fit in anywhere, and he takes like this turn almost like like psychopathically, like taking like this turn to go out at night, fight crime. After he gets stabbed and like almost dies, he still goes out and like tries to like fight all these criminals, and he ends up becoming part of a bigger world of superheroes, like local kind of real life superheroes. So I just think it's funny if they take the concept of if a teenager was to really be a superhero and how would that really look. And of course, it's not like really realistic, but it's something that gives like a grounded perspective.
Yeah,
I think, on the genre.
kind of the concept of vigilanteism. Right, where it's like if taking the law into your own hands sounds cool if you're Batman, but if you do it in real life, you're kind of a crazy person.
Right.
Where it's like, damn, bro, you're taking this too far. Like, leave that to the cops, because it's one of those things where being an actual superhero always sounds so much fun, but in reality, you're crazy. You're legitimately a psychopath if you try and do that.
Right.
Something that I feel like I was going to touch on in upcoming of Matthew Vaughn's films, but this one especially hits the nail on the head when it comes to Matthew's use of violence. I want to hear your thoughts on that, because one of the biggest things coming out of this movie is obviously Hit Girl.
Yeah.
And the concept of a little girl committing just horrific acts of violence, where to the point of so much extremism that it's comedic. It's comical. It's kind of like a parody, right? Because at first you're watching it and you're like, this is wrong.
Right.
This girl's 11. She should not be killing people this way.
Right.
And then when you're watching, you're like, oh, I get it. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be kind of like a comical, over the top perspective on the acts of violence that vigilantes commit. And the fact that it's a little girl doing this kind of makes it even more flipping it on its head, and even more like commentary on what it is about the violence and all that. But yeah, what are your comments on that? Because he does not shy away from violence. Matthew Vaughn does.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I remember when this movie came out, and I don't know if you're living in LA during the time.
I wasn't,
but I remember when this thing came out, like the Fox 11 News must have ran like at least 2 stories a night,
Yeah.
like talking about like this little girl in Kick-Ass is like cursing, swearing, violently killing people. Like, and that's kind of what drove me to see it, because I was like,
you're like, that sounds great.
Yeah. And I think, but yeah, I mean, it's controversial, and I think that's why a lot of the studios like passed on it. It was actually independently financed through like a lot of different like foreign companies or whatever, and eventually like Universal ended up buying it all whole right. But that's all those studios are passing on it, because it was like, oh, you're not gonna have like an 11, 12-year-old girl killing and cursing like at this level, like at that rate. And so they were just like, either you drop that whole character or you make it so she's like 18, 19, you know. But in terms of the use of violence, I mean, he definitely has like this kind of over the top way to presenting like the blood splats, you know, all of that stuff, and like the stabbings, like that whole part when she goes into like that, I guess it's almost like a trap house.
Yeah,
and, like,
the apartment little.
Yeah,
place,
yeah, and just like murders all those dudes, like beheading some guys, you know, like it's crazy. So, I mean, in terms of the violence wise, I mean, I like to see directors who get kind of fun with it. Tarantino does that a lot.
He does. Tarantino does not back away from that.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think that's, you know, Matthew Vaughn looking at people who inspire him and kind of taking a lot of those elements. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I don't see a lot of people say it has negative effects, especially on kids, especially when it's somebody like Hit Girl who's like 11. How are young boys and girls going to see that, and are they going to be influenced by that? I remember that's kind of a big conversation that came up during that time and still kind of comes up today. So
sure.
I mean, in general though, I mean, what do you think? Like, do you think the media?
It's such an interesting thing, because I mean, I was talking about this with my friend a couple days ago, because obviously it's hard to bring it up, but we're coming off the tails of a very horrific event in United States history, which is the Vegas shooting.
Right.
And it's one of those things where I hate, personally, right, coming from the world of art and film and stuff, like, you probably agree with me, most people who live here will probably agree with me and agree with you, that it's like this concept of like, you know, video games and violent video games and violent movies and all that stuff, it influences the kids to not really.
Yeah.
Having access influences people, I think, is the main thing. This is a rated R movie, so I'm not saying kids aren't watching it, but I'm saying like this isn't targeted towards kids in any way.
Right.
The thing that kind of gets me is Matthew Vaughn's commentary towards it, right? Because it's the commentary of who is the good guy in all this? Is there a good guy in all this? Because that's always the running theme with a superhero movie, right? If you watch a superhero movie or something and you jump right in the middle of it, and you just turn it on and have no perspective on who is who and what is what, you're always going to know who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. And this movie, since it's a kind of parody of that, you can kind of tune in and you see someone like Nicolas Cage, what's his name, Big Daddy?
Yeah, Big Daddy. Yeah.
You see a Nicolas Cage, Big Daddy, dressed in all black, carrying automatic weapons.
Yeah,
and
like literally destroying a warehouse.
And
like
shooting people left
yeah.
and right. If I'm going to tune into that in the middle of it and I have no perspective, I'm going to assume he's the bad guy, right? Or even if I see a Hit Girl taking out thugs, I'm going to assume she's a bad guy.
Right.
I'm going to assume that they're somehow psychologically not right in the brain to be doing all this stuff.
Right.
And maybe that's Matthew Vaughn's way of saying the protagonist isn't always going to be the good guy, even if they are sort of labeled that way, or if they label themselves that way. Because Big Daddy sees himself as a good guy. But is he?
Yeah.
Right? Or is Hit Girl? Like, that's always a concept that I think the first Kick-Ass, because we're not going to talk about the second one, the first Kick-Ass kind of hits that in the right way.
Right.
Where it's like you can watch it and you can see a Hit Girl and you can see a Big Daddy doing all these things, and it's your choice to decide if they are the good guy or not. Because I think Kick-Ass gives you that option, whereas other superhero movies don't give you that option. This is the good guy, and you're supposed to follow him. Whereas Kick-Ass kind of says, is he the good guy? You decide. If you think shooting all those people is totally okay, then sure, he's the good guy. If not, then he's a psychopath, and he probably shouldn't be doing any of this stuff. So I know that's a little bit deeper than what maybe we see initially in the film, but I do think it's there with the extreme violence.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point with like who's actually committing the violence, and I think when you look at even like you said, from the good guy side, from the bad guy side, like both sides kind of have like idiots. You know what I mean? The Mark Strong character in this movie literally kills somebody because he puts them in a microwave. You know, people are literally getting like rocket launched out of windows. You know, so it's like at a certain point, it's like it's the responsibility of the viewer to like interpret it how they want to interpret it. And if they see themselves relating to like the Big Daddy like Batman ripoff dude, if they see it's kind of funny. Like I think if somebody came in and watched this movie and just saw like that Big Daddy warehouse fight, they would think it's like a parody of Batman or something. But it's all the way to the cranked up to 11 in terms of violence. So do people still interpret him as like a Batman kind of deal that kills people, that does all this? And then where does that line toe for superheroes? You know, should they be allowed to kill? Where, and coming off of a comic book written by Mark Millar, who was just famous for over sensationalizing violence of all of his characters, even if they're somebody big like Tony Stark or like Captain America. He'll go extra ham on the violence with them just to explore like where's the line toe? What does being a superhero mean if you're hurting people in the act? So I think that's one of the themes that they explore here really well. And I think also like they explore like geek culture really well too. Like the idea of somebody being so influenced by something that they read or something that they see.
Something that they idolize and worship.
Exactly. And what happens when they start to adapt that behavior, and what happens when other people become privy to that behavior.
That's a good point. And you actually have access and opportunity to commit those acts of vigilantism, right?
Right.
What happens? It's not so much like I really want to do it. I really want to do it. I really want to do it. As far as like be Batman or be a superhero, but I know I can't. What happens when I can? What happens when I have access to weaponry? I have the ability to physically put someone through pain, and I have a way to somehow cover myself and cover my tracks, right? Training, I guess you can say. It opens up that door of like, what happens if stuff that influences you actually influences you to commit acts of violence, right? I don't know. It's all very interesting because again, it comes down to the purpose of it, and it comes down to the reality of it, as far as taking the law into your own hands, right?
Right.
Where's the line between a vigilante and a terrorist, right? Is that line as big as we think it is, or is it a little bit thinner?
Right.
So
there's also like a really brilliant like comedy in terms of like spoofing the genre.
Sure.
They open with that like the whole idea of like a tragic backstory, kind of playing it for a joke, like with his mother dying over the bowl of cereal, and they have like a lot of little jokes in there that play and test with the with what we will see in like the traditional standard of a superhero movie.
Absolutely.
I think it's also the first film that like incorporated the idea of like having a viral sensation superhero. Like we see that a lot now, like a lot. We just saw that recently, I think, with one of the films. I can't put my finger on it, but with Kick-Ass though, especially, it was like he got videotaped, got put on YouTube. Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh yeah.
That was a big theme in there, and it's a big theme. I hadn't seen any other movie tackle that except for Kick-Ass before, where like somebody literally videos him, put him on YouTube, and like that's how he becomes like a viral sensation, and people start emailing him. So it's interesting. You never see that side of the superhero movie until this point, and I think that's really how it manages to break a lot of cool ground in the genre. So
cool. Let's move on to his next film, which is my favorite of his films.
Okay.
Speaking of superhero movies, X-Men First Class.
First Class.
This is the one that everyone always goes back to when they talk about Matthew Vaughn. They kind of have forgotten Kick-Ass a little bit. Layer Cake is way too far back in the back of their mind. But X-Men First Class was coming off the heels of like the X-Men franchise. It came after Last Stand, which a lot of people were like, crap, what's going to happen now?
Came after X-Men Origins.
X-Men Origins, right, you're right. And it's one of those things where it's like, what's going to happen now that our favorite X-Men characters are kind of in hiatus and kind of in a state of limbo as far as quality-wise.
Right.
Matthew Vaughn came with this movie, which was a prequel movie, which I remember when it was coming out, and a lot of people were like, really? A prequel movie about Charles Xavier and Magneto? This is going to be terrible. And I cannot lie, RB3, walking into the theater, watching this movie, and walking out, it's such an experience for me. It really was, just being an X-Men fan. And obviously, a lot of you guys know I'm a freaking comic book nerd. I'm a nerd. Like, that's just what I grew up with. And X-Men is one of those franchises that heavily influenced me. So on a personal level, watching this movie, it was very much like, damn, this was so well done. These are my favorite characters coming together, and it comes from another realistic kind of perspective as far as Magneto, right?
Right.
This is essentially the Magneto origin story, because
Right.
Professor Charles Xavier is very much at face value what he is, right? This kid, influential family, going through school, all this stuff, the themes of being a pacifist, the themes of being X-Men comes, the Charles Xavier and Magneto relationship comes between the themes of the civil rights movement, which is Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, yeah.
It comes from those themes. So we see that, but seeing the backstory of Magneto, someone who I've loved like passionately, one of my all-time favorite comic book characters, and seeing that POV, seeing that point of view, it becomes so much more gray. Whereas we take a character like Magneto and we always label him as a villain because he kind of is a villain, but at the same time, is he a villain, or is he just a guy who's passionate about persecution and passionate about discrimination and hate crime?
He has a very jaded perspective.
Jaded perspective, but he's so passionate and so jaded about it, about his people. And he's so tired of being discriminated, and so tired of hate crimes, and so tired of his people being persecuted, that he takes matters into his own hands to a certain extreme, right? That to me is just, you can say whatever you want about this film, but that to me is so well done, and it's handled perfectly through Matthew Vaughn's hands and through Michael Fassbender's hands, because I think his performance as Magneto is flawless, and it's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the script was originally written to be the X-Men Origins Magneto, and then they rewrote a lot of it to incorporate the Xavier story and eventually like the whole X-Men in general, the foundation of X-Men at least. And to me, this is the second best X-Men movie for me personally, close right behind Days of Future Past.
Okay, this one to me is always a toss up between this one and sometimes X-Men 2.
Okay, I love that one too. Yeah. But and again, this came out during a time when like everybody was shitting on the X-Men, right? Last Stand was a disappointment. Wolverine, nobody liked, and so coming into this movie, I remember this was post MCU, so like Iron Man 2 had already gotten started. This was in between like the Dark Knight movie, so a lot.
You know what came out the same week as this movie, or the same 2 weeks? Green Lantern.
No, it did, because this came out at the end of May.
Because you know why I knew that? I know it because I was gonna go watch Green Lantern, and a friend of mine who was working at the theater was like, maybe you should see X-Men First Class instead. I saw Green Lantern. It's not very good, and I was like, I'll take your word for it. Give me 2 tickets to X-Men First Class, and that's how I went.
Really, that's so funny. Yeah, I do remember this came out at the end of May, and then Green Lantern came out like June 17th, which is my birthday. I remember that. Yeah, so it was definitely like with First Class at least, it was something new to the genre, taking it back, making it a period piece, dissecting. You're kind of talking about the civil rights implications of it, and I think that's definitely something that Vaughn took into consideration when like crafting these characters, because you see, kind of almost paralleling the story of like the real Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. One had like a harder struggle, harder lifetime, comes, like I said, jaded perspective, and then you have one that comes from more influential side, and has more opportunities, more access to things, and we're backed by a lot more people. That being Martin Luther King, and the other person being Malcolm X, and they incorporate all of those story elements into that. And I think in making, we saw that early flashback of the Holocaust with Magneto and Kevin Bacon, and I think that's also an interesting way to look at it too. We saw the brief glimpse of that in the first X-Men, but we see it fully expanded here, and I kind of like reading the X-Men a lot through the 80s when it was taken over by Chris Claremont. He kind of talks about how the X-Men is almost representative of like Jewish culture as well, in that like people who look just like you, who are also white, like, or have like a European background, but also being discriminated against by other white people because of what they believe in. And that's the same with the X-Men. It's like they're here in plain sight, but people still discriminate against them. So
Yeah.
it's he manages to fit in a lot of these different boxes and checks. And with having Jennifer Lawrence being someone who's like poor, just walks into
Xavier's Kitchen.
and is brought up into a whole different lifestyle now. It's just fascinating.
It's at the core of the X-Men characters and the core of the X-Men story is all about discrimination. It's all about people who feel like they have more of a right to something towards you because of their background. Yeah. It's very Nazi. I mean, that's why bringing in that, like you said, about the Holocaust, about the Nazis, about how they were trying to purify the race and all this stuff about race and about religion and about beliefs and about discrimination and about hate and hate crime. That's at the core of the X-Men characters since the inception of the X-Men, since the very beginning.
Right.
And that's what I love so much about it, is that Matthew Vaughn incorporates all those elements, like you said, the Malcolm X angle, the Nazi angle, the all these angles that it takes. And it's something I love as well. And I know that he's not really a part of this story, but his dad is, Azazel. Nightcrawler. What I've always loved about Nightcrawler is the fact that he's hardcore. I mean, Catholic. Hardcore Catholic. Yeah. Loves Jesus, loves the Lord, loves all this stuff. And he looks like a demon. Right. And it's those things that it's like, and everyone hates him because he looks like a demon. And he's like, I'm way more Christian than you are, bro. Right. But I look like a demon. It's that concept of like, I'm going to discriminate you because of the way you look, because of what you are, because of your background. That's at the core of the X-Men. And that's why watching that movie really makes you think. Because I can't lie, RB3, I'm kind of Team Magneto as far as watching this movie. Because he brings up those points. He's like, dude, look at this, look at that, look at this. Look at the discrimination we faced. I've been at the hands of men who are just following orders, no more. Right. When are we going to stop at it's okay to do something if you're following orders, or it's okay to do something because we were told to do something, or we believe a certain way and we're somehow justifying ourselves. When is it the right time to show our hand through a forceful method?
Right.
Not a peaceful method, but a forceful method, something that people will actually listen to. Mm-hmm. That to me is so interesting. And I also love the concept of the relationship between him and his mother, right? Where it's that concept of like, it's one of my favorite lines in the movie, and it's one of my favorite lines in general. When he's like, I agree with everything you just said to Kevin Bacon, he tells him, but you killed my mom. Right. He's one of those things where he's like, dude, you're totally right, but you killed my mom, so I'm going to kill you. And it's like those things where it's so good. And also the concept between good and evil. I love it because Matthew Vaughn, Magneto, and Charles Xavier have this moment where where Professor Xavier taps into his bright memory.
I was just going to mention that.
And he taps into the memory of his mom. And he taps into as far as like what he uses as far as rage to use his powers. And then I forget the line, but it's something like somewhere between rage and serenity is the perfect balance. Somewhere between physical anger and passion and peacefulness and love do you find the balance to accomplish great things. It takes drive and sometimes righteous anger to accomplish a goal that you're really passionate about, but it also takes peace of mind, and it also takes serenity and patience to accomplish your goal, because you can't get it right away, but at the same time you want to try and balance those two. That to me is just like, that's so good. Mm-hmm. It's completely fascinating. And that's why I love the character of Magneto so much, because he doesn't fall into a spectrum of a bad guy. He falls into the spectrum of, like you said, someone who's jaded, someone who's been through some things personally, who's seen the Holocaust firsthand, who's seen the effects of racism, of the Nazis, and he says, no more, no more. I think that's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, and they obviously address a lot more of the political stuff when talking about, well, when talking about the kids individually, and that's kind of where the movie doesn't work for me almost.
Okay. Which part?
You know that whole part where like all the kids are like staying in like in the government facility, and then Azazel comes and a few of the other like the bad the bad X-Men.
Hellfire Club.
Yeah. There we go, exactly. And they come in and first guy that kills the black guy, and they give him this whole lecture about like you being discriminated against, and they give him a close up right on him. I'm like, okay, all right, I got it. Okay, you're laying it on a little thick for me now. So so to me, and then I didn't like what the kids like the whole interaction together. To begin with,
the party scene.
Yeah. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, Zoe Kravitz though.
Yeah,
shout out to Zoe Kravitz.
She's great. She's great. It's funny. Kind of talking about another continuation of the franchise, like Apocalypse. Like I didn't like Apocalypse, but the only part I did like were when the kids were hanging out, as opposed to this movie where I love every other element of this movie, but just the kids hanging out just kind of doesn't work for me. But other than that, no, I think X-Men First Class is a great commentary on like how if these superhero events were to take place in the real world, and the real history that we have in the United States.
I mean, the fact that it takes place in the 60s, right?
Right.
So
with
good.
The Cuban Missile Crisis, the whole thing with the generals, because that's so true. Like, and like the early 60s was just like, oh, you want to get like a powerful place in government, just like seduce a senator or something like that. Like, and I guess that's still kind of true now, but it's just interesting how they play on that and how they incorporate how these superheroes will like actually live through that era. And I think that was also kind of a first of its kind for doing that too.
Yeah, so. It's so good, man. And there's so many good things to say about it. One other thing I love, and I know this is such a cliche thing, and it's such a thing that people take out of hand now because this movie did it so well. It's that scene where Magneto is looking at Jennifer Lawrence, and Jennifer Lawrence is working out. She's doing the bench press, and Magneto's like, "Why aren't you in your true form?" And she turns back into like the older lady, and he's like, "No, you're oh no, that's when she's waiting for him in bed. I'm sorry, I'm confusing my scenes." Yeah. And then she says, "No, your true form." And then it turns into Mystique, and he's like, perfection. And then everyone takes that like perfection line. Yeah. But he says a great line when she's working out and his blue form, and she turns into her blue form, and he says something like, you're so passionate about your rights as a mutant, your mutant rights, but you're not willing to show everyone who you truly are. I think that's great, and I think the concept of Mystique in general, which is why I hated what they did to her in Apocalypse, right? I mean, it's terrible. That's why the whole Jennifer Lawrence thing kind of blew up, because it's like the whole concept of Mystique, the whole point of her character is that she looks really freaking weird and blue, and she embraces that fully, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I was so bummed out where it's just blonde Jennifer Lawrence the whole time. But anyways, that's a whole different thing. It's the concept of like Mystique being the way she is, and no matter what people say about her, and how that's what Magneto views as perfection, is being who you are, no matter how scarred it is.
Right. And of course, this is Hunger Games, Jennifer Lawrence. So
yeah, this is like, I didn't know who she was.
I
mean, it's kind of, it was like following years. I think it might have been. It was close to Hunger Games.
Yeah, it was like the next year, the next summer, Hunger Games it came out, and then she just became the biggest star in the world. But this movie is obviously a great debut for a lot of great actors. James McAvoy.
Michael Fassbender.
Oh,
so good in this role.
Yeah.
He broke my heart in this role, man.
Yeah.
I love it. And obviously that scene in Argentina, I can't stop talking about it, when he's in the bar with the Nazis.
Yeah.
It's such a good scene where he's like, my parents didn't have a name. They were taken from tailors and pig farmers. And he's like talking about how like those Nazis are like, we're retired now. We did bad things, but we're cool, right? And he's like, no, you're not going to get away with that.
Right.
You were a Nazi. You killed innocent people. Goodbye.
And I was like,
I love it. I'm like, yes, dude, that's awesome.
That was like a really cool like moment from like the like a taken from like Inglourious Bastards.
Yep,
but
it's a very Tarantino scene.
Like making it a superhero thing. So I love that. Like,
it's so good. All right, let's move on to Kingsman. Kingsman's Secret Service. This movie got a lot of popularity when it came out, as far as word of mouth and as far as like box office legs. Mm-hmm. People kept watching it. This is another one of his that's kind of an odd film. It balances on themes of class quite a bit because the entire concept of this, it's another Mark Millar comic as well.
Adaptation. And I forgot to mention for X-Men First Class, like
Sure.
Mark Millar didn't write it, but he was a creative consultant.
Sure. Yeah.
With on that film. So
And
like,
he's done some X-Men stuff before.
yeah, yes, yeah. So like in all of the Fox X-Men films, he's a creative consultant. So and then Vaughn kind of brought him in through that. So
There you go.
Really like all of his last 4 films are
They're all
like
Millar. Yep.
Yeah.
He has a very close relationship with Millar. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
Mutant and Proud, man. Mutant and Proud. Anyways, Kingsman. This one deals with kind of a concept of, I rewatched it recently, so it's even heavier on my head right now, of class, of gentleman, what it means to be a gentleman. Does gentleman mean how much money I have? Does it mean how I speak? Does it mean who I interact with? Does it mean, what does it mean? It's the whole manners maketh man kind of story, which I like quite a bit. This is obviously a little bit more British of a film than other films that he did, like an X-Men First Class, which isn't really British. But this is very much like that British classism of like the South London, hey, bruv, you talking about, bruv? The fuck you talking about, bruv? And the way they like talk like that, and it's like the very South London kind of. I love the way they talk. For me, one of my favorite movies. I gotta give a shout out to Attack the Block. If you haven't seen Attack the Block, it's great. It stars John Boyega, pre Star Wars, and it's that concept of like subtitles, because I don't know what they're saying, but it sounds dope. But it's one of those things where it's like that South London kind of like kid who it comes from a very poor background and has that heavy accent and has that kind of street style and that kind of like who gives a crap kind of mentality, and who comes, and yet he's still extremely smart, extremely talented, physically fit, and he wanted to be a Marine, but his mom didn't want him to be a Marine. Mm-hmm. And it's the Michael Caine, King Arthur, who says that, you know, he's not from our class. He's not from our class. He's not one of us. He tells that to Colin Firth's character, Colin Firth, Galahad. What's his actual name? Galahad is his...
Did they say his name? Oh, Harry. Yeah,
Harry.
Yeah.
Harry, who Colin Firth, he's always defending him. He's always like, no, he's one of us.
Right.
And Michael Caine, who's playing that kind of like British high class kind of snobby guy, who's like, he wasn't one of us. He was just a lower class man. And he's like, no, Eggsy's father saved my life, and he was always one of us. Doesn't matter what background he came from. Mm-hmm. And it has that kind of theme running through the entire kind of movie. Yeah, it's one of those movies that people always look at the action of it, but it has that theme playing throughout it. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I enjoy Kingsman quite a bit. It's not like
you don't think it's as good as it's hyped to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, you basically nailed it right on the head. I mean, there's a lot.
This was a very hyped movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is even like the fan base now. Like I tweeted something about Kingsman.
People love their Kingsman.
Yeah, so it's like
I found a lot of Kingsman fans.
Right.
I was like, damn, where are you guys from, man?
So I apologize ahead of time if it kind of sounds like I'm shitting on Kingsman or Kingsman 2. I'm not. Maybe Kingsman 2.
We'll get to Kingsman 2.
Yeah, but the first one's very, very cool though. I mean, it's a nice play on the spy genre. It's really like you said, a breakdown of class. What the manners make of the man. How to behave and like how to take somebody from like the streets, the bottom, the South London, and bring them to the top of this like secret government organization. What is that like? How is that going to be for him? And it works on a lot of different levels. It's a big commentary on the idea of Americanization as well, with Samuel L. Jackson, how he's kind of like this commercialized out cat. He only eats McDonald's for dinner. And
playing as Russell Simmons.
Yeah, playing as Russell Simmons, exactly. And he wearing like Jordan shoes, and but his whole plot is to take out the world using technology. And
but it's also a commentary on climate change.
Yeah.
And as far as like the only way to battle climate change is
to kill everybody.
Yeah. It's basically population control.
Right, exactly. And of course that is, and how does that way of technology, obviously it doesn't gel with like the old kind of classy British way, of like the gentleman, it's definitely, like kind of like the stereotypes we have of British culture is like, oh, they don't have phones, they call each, stuff like that. Like it's a very proper, very uptight, studious kind of deal. But this guy who's like this American dude who who wants to take down the world using technology. You can see why that would be a threat to the Kingsman.
Sure.
And having the main plot being like, oh, we're gonna kill each other with like over aggression. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That kind of plays into like how there's not a lot of gentlemen in the world. You know, where's the level of politeness or manners or stuff like that? And they they address all of these topics. Like, I'm kind of saying it serious, but they play it in a really funny way.
Yeah. One thing I definitely want to bring up to you, because I'm curious. Mark Millar, Matthew Vaughn's Kingsman movies play into a little bit of a political atmosphere, a little bit more than his other movies, as far as like the politics nowadays. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because I feel like his message gets a little muddled, and I think he does that on purpose, but I'm not quite sure. Let me break this down for you. A rich guy who believes in climate change, who believes climate change is destroying the earth, but it's humanity's fault that it's destroying the earth, right? And it's true. I mean, it pretty much is true. His decision to solve this issue, kind of like Michael Caine says in the movie, humanity is a virus. Earth is the one trying to fight off the virus. You know, how do we fight off the virus? By let's just get rid of a significant amount of the population that destroys the planet. And that way we have a way of surviving this. And the only way to battle an overcoming issue that we cannot overcome is by taking out an entire class of system and only leaving the 1%ers. Because the people who stay in the bunkers and the people who are safe from the message is the 1%ers, is the rich people. But it's almost like it's the senators, it's the governors, it's the
actual president of the United States.
The actual President Obama. Shout out to Obama. It's those kind of like elite people. It's the elitist, right? And it's not even the right elitist, or it's more like the left elitist, if anything, right?
Yeah.
It's the CEOs and the big business people who kind of believe this to be an issue, and they're saving their 1%ers, and they're leaving the entire rest of the middle class and lower class to literally kill each other out.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Because that's something that's in the movie very clearly.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, man. I think I mean, with the 1% thing, you're definitely right. I think that's what they're going for. I think, and even having the protagonist be like this lower class, like guy who lives in like the slums of South London, making him the protagonist is like almost, it's like it's saying like you guys are continuously oppressing this group, and how is the 1% going to keep sustaining that? The only way that the 1% could see, winning the situation is through just eliminating the rest of the population. And again, but you're not so off when you're talking about like the idea of climate change. Like, well, is it the right thing? Is that even though the actual actions are horrible.
Yeah, is a way to save the earth to sacrifice ourselves.
Yeah,
it's the whole Noah's Ark thing. It's the whole concept of Darren Aronofsky's Noah, right? The way to save the earth is literally to destroy humanity through a flood. That was God's way of saving the planet and kind of purifying the planet of all the crap that was on it as far as humanity, and saving one family. It's got a very Noah's Ark kind of feel. Saving one family or one group of people, replacing that. And that's the 1%ers and the people who are very conscious of the planet, right? And the people who are like now going to repopulate the world. It's going to be the higher class people. And then obviously, spoilers at the end of the movie when he freaking pops all their heads off and kills all the 1%ers.
Yeah.
That's another thing too that I was like, watching the movie the first time, I was like, "Ooh, that's a very strong message to send."
Right.
It's like, "Hey, 1%ers, we're gonna pop your heads off."
Right.
It's like, damn, that's a little cold.
Like colorful, like rainbow explosions.
Yeah. One thing I want to say, jumping off that point, something that's very prominent in this film, and I feel like it's something that everyone talks about when they talk about the Kingsman movie, and I really want to bring this up to you, and it goes back to that. It was such a controversial scene that they actually cut it from a few cuts of the movies when they were showing it in other countries.
The Kentucky,
they cut it. They cut it from Mexico. I know that,
really?
Or at least I think in South America or Mexico. I'm sure someone's going to correct me, but I know I got a tweet one time saying, "Hey, why did the church scene get cut from the Mexican version?" This is a very controversial scene. So here's my thing about it. it's known as a church hate group, the Kentucky Church. And then the whole plot is that Samuel L. Jackson's character is going to test out his aggression thing with a small group of people, which is this church hate group that he says, if they kill each other off, whatever, no one's going to miss them. No one's going to shed a tear, right? I think they're kind of supposed to represent kind of the Westboro Baptist Church kind of.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The kind of hate group as far as the church. Here's my thing about it. The problem I have with it is two things. Obviously, I'm not going to be the one to say that I have a huge issue with it, but it's that concept of like, there are people like this. There are people who, Matthew Vaughn didn't shy away from showing these people to be a hate-filled group. Yeah. This isn't your average church. Slurs, they say the N-word quite a few times in this scene, which was a little hard to see in this movie. They say the N-word. They say, like you said before, extremely racist slurs, homophobic slurs. And they really paint this church group to be like, Christianity, these Christian people hate this, blah, 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 blah. But I feel like what Matthew Vaughn did with it was when he does a whole action violent scene when what's his name, Harry Galahad kills everyone in the church in an extremely violent way, in an extremely over-the-top way. I can't lie. I want to hear your thoughts on this because I'm sure everyone loved this scene, and it's great. It really is an amazing action scene. But the concept of, like, we're dealing with these people right now in our day and age with these hate groups who use the Christian platform, who use church as a way to justify their hate and to make it their foundation and kind of perverting the church in a way. What I feel is that Matthew Vaughn showing that scene is kind of saying, do we really feel bad when they got shot in the head? Right? You know what I'm saying? Is the way to battle these people violence? Because me being such a peaceful pacifist guy who hates violence in real life is the way to battle these racist, homophobic people through violence. Because the movie kind of says, they got killed. It's in a violent way, but they suck anyways. They're racist. And it's true. They are racist and they do suck. But is it really still okay to kill these people?
Right. I mean, it's kind of played like asking, if, are these people deplorables? How much is their life worth over the life of like our protagonist?
And they made it a very clear point to show that these people are racist and homophobic. They're not killers. They're not murderers. They're just racist and homophobic.
But then when the rage starts to come out, you see the more violent tendencies come out as a side effect of like the thing that triggered in their brain.
I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on it because for me, it's one of those things where it's like, is he saying that violence is okay against racist people? I mean, if that's what he thinks, that's what he thinks. But I'm just curious if that's what he's saying.
Right. No, I mean,
it's that whole punch a Nazi guy thing.
Right. It's like if
if
these people doing wrong, does that make their life, their value like worth less? Are they less people?
Is promoting violence, is promoting hatred. Does that justify violence towards them?
Yeah, and again, this is coming from Matthew Vaughn, who's like, as much as a great director he is, he's pretty mean-spirited in his films. Like, he will very much poke at people he doesn't like.
Yeah.
We saw that in like Kick-Ass. We see that especially here and in this church scene, and it's asking whether or not hatred justifies violence is like to me it doesn't. Almost nothing justifies any sort of violence.
Yeah, but do you feel like this scene's
painting it that way,
painting it to say like watching this scene and watching it as like our perspective, we're like, yeah, let him die, but at the same time you're like, should I be feeling that way? Let him die.
Well, they definitely paint the picture of making sure you have no empathy for these people, no remorse for when they die, when they get shot in the head. So it's like, and portraying like, I mean, they come off cartoony, kind of here, you know what I mean? Like when they're doing like their little speeches or whatever.
Their message,
Yeah. So it's like, they're but are they over exaggerations? I don't know. I've never met anybody who was like Westboro Baptist Church, So, it's kind of a weird thing of like, well, yeah, these people are no good, but they're still functioning members of society. They're
still people. They still haven't committed crimes.
Right. They're still mothers. They're still fathers. They're still daughters and sons involved in that stuff. But
watching them die was a little bit satisfying.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Right. And again, I guess it depends on what like side of the fence you lie on with some
Yeah.
of these issues.
I don't think there is a side of the fence, to be honest. I think it's clearly what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
I just think the framing of it is kind of odd. Putting it inside a church, a little bit weird. Putting it as Christian, a little bit, heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And then kind of putting them in a situation where they're literally killing each other and getting shot in the head. I think the framing of it is more than the actual message of it. I don't know. To me, that's one of the things that stands out the most in the Kingsman movie.
Yeah, they kick it off with again making sure you don't feel any remorse for these people, making sure that you hate these people just as much as Colin Firth does. And when he starts popping off and when he starts, slaying people down and whatnot, that you're rooting for him. And
exactly, but in the movie he wasn't even attempting to do that, right?
Right.
It was something that he didn't want to do. He was forced to do.
Right, but you could see but before that build up, he was very much like, oh, I got to get out of here. Like I can't sit with these people anymore. Like I think he was even, like,
of course,
getting ready to get up. So it's like, you see why somebody like him will be provoked to do that. But at the end of the day, like they're all sociopaths who who don't see equality and justice for people and equal rights. But does that justify them not having a place in this world anymore?
Yeah, does that justify the manner in which they were killed, right? Because we've seen scenes like this in movies before. We've seen shootouts. We've seen like a million people get died. I mean, you've seen movies like The Raid where like a bunch of thugs get killed.
Yeah.
But you see them as like killers, rapists, people who have literally given away their right to live, in a sense, right? Where it's like that concept of like, I'm a killer, I'm a rapist, I'm someone who's like the worst of humanity. When you see it in an action film and in a shootout, you're just like, damn, yeah, that's cool, that's crazy. But seeing it in a church, seeing it with racist people and discriminating people who are a burden to society, but are they justifiable of getting shot in the head a million times? Like it's something that, to me, watching it, I was very much like, what's the message here? That the way we should battle these systems and these people is through violence. I mean, right. I don't know. That to me is something that.
Well, and I think that goes to a larger point of like his commentary on American culture, and we'll talk about this in the Golden Circle.
Let's jump to it. Let's jump to Kingsman 2 as well, because
right.
I feel like Kingsman 2 kind of obviously intersects with this movie. Obviously, you have your thoughts on this movie. We saw this movie together last week, full disclosure, and I sat next to RB3, and it's so funny because RB3 and I were watching this movie, and obviously this movie is ridiculous, but RB3 is cracking his way all the way through the movie, just cracking up. You can hear the RB3 laughs now. And then he turns to me after the movie, he's like, that movie sucked, bro. After hours of cracking up, and he's like, that sucked. But this movie...
it's kind of a cringe fest, man. I mean, I was kind of laughing more at like how cringy some of the lines were at the very beginning. I told you this after the movie, but I can't find the quote online, but there's one part in there where
I know exactly. After you told me, I didn't know what you were talking about, but thinking about it on my way home, I knew exactly when they were talking about the Golden Circle, and I was like, it must be some sort of secret organization. Yeah, and you're just like, how'd you get to that conclusion? What? Just because they got a logo? Damn.
And she said it all slow and dramatic. Like, I don't know. There's like a lot of moments in there for me.
There's some fun moments. I kind of want to talk about this movie. The thing about this movie that stands out, obviously, is Eggsy being a full-formed Kingsman. It's the introduction of the Golden Circle. It's introduction of the Statesman, which to me was interesting because the Statesman represents the super cliche Americana, Southern Kentucky, talking with a Southern accent, gun-toting, cowboy hat-wearing, cowboy super spy, which is kind of ridiculous, but in a way it kind of worked for me. I don't know why it worked. I like seeing Channing Tatum be that kind of cowboy, super South dude, super spy kind of guy. I like that. I actually liked Pedro Pascal's version of that too. I hated what they did with him at the end of the movie, which I obviously was talking to you about. But obviously, this is the movie I mainly was referring to when I said that when it comes to politics, Matthew Vaughn gets a little muddled. Where he's like, okay, so the villain is someone who wants to legalize drugs, but at the same time, the villain is the president because he wants to get rid of everyone on drugs because he won the war on drugs because they're all going to die out. But at the same time, it's like drugs are bad, drugs are okay. You should do drugs, you shouldn't do drugs. In fact, what is the message? Like, I was so confused. I was like, what are you trying to say, dude? Like, I don't know. This movie, the message to me, the meaning of this film was a little bit muddled because the villain was a drug dealer who wanted to legalize drugs, and the villain was someone who was like war against drugs. What do you think about this, man?
It's just, I don't know, man. The whole movie.
That's the episode of today's meeting up.
Just joking. I can't stop
thinking. But we do have like a little bit of time left.
yeah. But no, they I don't know, man. It didn't work for me at all.
So
like
basically,
there is no.
Let me break it down. The thing is, the whole theme of this movie is that drugs are literally killing humanity. Anyone who does even the tiniest puff of freaking weed,
and that's
gonna die.
That's where I
and they're literally gonna die.
I don't get this whole idea of like, like, you know, there's like, of course, you know, they're saying like pharmaceutical drugs are just as bad, but it's like, why are you putting like weed on like the same dude, like same
as
level
heroin?
As some dude like literally smoking crack.
Or heroin, or
yeah,
like any kind of drug.
Like it's just
because
like,
at the end, what's her face gets injected with heroin.
Yeah,
and you're like, heroin, and all right.
Like the president's, like you know, the Secretary of State or whatever. She's
like, drugs aren't that bad.
Yeah, she's like, people actually need the help. I don't know. So
sometimes you need a little puff now and then, Mr. President.
And by the way, do you think they like rewrote a lot of this like after Trump got elected?
I don't know. I mean, we can jump into that, but I feel like I don't know.
They were definitely saying something about that.
Also, the fact that like, how did the whole time I was thinking, wait a minute, if even like the tiniest Eggsy didn't have any rash that tried to kill him with drugs.
They literally showed him earlier.
Even when they showed him earlier with like a freaking giant bag of weed.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I don't know, this movie to me, obviously let's not get into the whole different concept of like the finale of the movie with Mark Strong's character of Merlin, who I love, by the way.
Literally sings.
Hey man, that broke my heart, RB3. That broke my damn heart. Anyways, to me, it just got a little bit muddled to me as far as like the president being like, yeah, like, yay, we get rid of drug people who even do the tiniest bit of drugs. And then versus the, what's her freaking name? Julianne Moore's character of being like, let's legalize drugs and we can be a more functioning society. And yet she's still really kind of psycho and evil. So you're just you're not right either.
And you got Jeff Bridges like representing like the alcohol, like people.
Sure.
Like, and there's still that whole debate of like, what is alcohol better than drugs? Where
alcohol is a drug too, right? And yet there's a line that he says, he's like, stick to whiskey, son, or something like that. That he says, oh no, Halle Berry says that to someone, to Channing Tatum.
Right.
When he wakes up from his dream, he's like, next time, stick to whiskey, son, or something like that.
Yeah, but I don't get what they're
I was like, that's a weird.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you're like, oh, I get it. They're saying that the war on drugs is bullshit. That's what I thought. And then at the end, what's his face? When Eggsy's friend comes back, he's like, I ain't never doing that shit again, bruv. I ain't never touching that shit, bruv. And I'm just like, wait a minute. You just said that it was okay, but now you're saying I'm never going to touch that again. So maybe we shouldn't touch drugs. Is this a war on drugs? I was confused. I was like, wait a minute. What are you trying to say? I don't know. This movie confused me as far as the message of the movie.
Yeah, I mean,
there's some cool action scenes. I thought the
action is good.
I thought Charlie was a badass. I told you that, Metal Hand Charlie.
Oh yeah.
I thought Pedro Pascal was cool. I hated what they did with him, as far as like, you know, meth head killed my wife. Now I'm gonna try to get rid of all the meth heads. And I was like, oh really?
Well, you know
and
what?
Then you kill him at the end anyways. I don't know. That bugged me.
I will say for Kingsman 2, I think the action definitely highlights what Vaughn does in all of his films. Like, I'm rewatching all of his movies after seeing Kingsman 2. You can tell the action's always very close. It's like you use like short angle lenses to like shoot a lot of his stuff.
It's great.
So like you're like really in close when they're doing like the action and movements. But I didn't like them copying the bar scene from the first one.
Yeah.
And just kind of redoing it again.
Redoing it again with Pedro.
Yeah, I just hate when like any sequel does that. Like take their best moment from the first one and like recreate it again.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure they were told to do that, to be honest, but that's a different conversation. I'm going to say my last words on the film just because we ran out of time. Last words on the film. I love Pedro Pascal. I have my thoughts as far as I'm always going to bring this up because guess what? I'm Latino, so I'm going to bring it up. I don't care what you guys think. That's who I am. And just the fact that he's he's kind of the rising star we have as far as Latino actors go. He's from Chile. He's a Chileno guy. He plays obviously the Red Viper, Oberyn Martell, R.I.P. And what they do with his character at the end kind of rubbed me the wrong way as far as the whole upbringing of the character and as far as the whole concept of bringing this Latino character and his the way he went out to me was just so pathetic. Not just in the sense of like the justification of like, let's feel for him and then let's get rid of him 2 seconds later.
Yeah.
That to me rubbed me the wrong way. Also, the concept of stacking the drug dealers inside stadiums.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, really now? Alrighty, cool. I think there's a lot of positive in this movie as far as action goes. I think there's a lot of negative as far as story-wise goes. Overall, I think Matthew Vaughn had too much to say and just didn't really find the clear message. That's my last thought.
Well, I think, definitely coming off of Kingsman, which was a nice look at, like, British culture and, kind of piggybacking off the 60s spy movie ideas like that Bond brings to the British. They take the American concepts of the Western, of the John Waynes and all that stuff.
Sure.
Take it and apply those stereotypes to that. So I think in that respect, it's interesting. The whole idea of them being, an alcohol company is cool because you get to see like this is like literally what the Back of America was based off of. Like there was a time in history where there was no alcohol and literally the country almost fell apart.
And it's also the concept of prohibition, right?
Right, exactly.
What prohibition does as far as alcohol, drugs.
Right, but now
that's another muddle thing in the movie. As far as like, why is the alcohol, lifting that prohibition okay, but why is it for drugs not okay? That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. So and I think that's where like that movie fell apart to me a lot. I don't really know what they were saying. I don't get what they were saying.
I didn't get it either.
I don't get, and
you could say, oh, it was a very left agenda. Was it? Not really.
Not really.
It seemed kind of right to me. And then when you're like, it wasn't really right either.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
it didn't really have anything clear to say to me. Yeah. And it didn't really, the action scenes were cool. Like I said, there were some cool elements, but the cringy dialogue was too much. To me, this is the only bad Matthew Vaughn film. Matthew Vaughn, if you're listening, you're probably not. But if you're listening, I love all your movies. All your movies are great. This one just didn't work for me personally.
Cool. I wouldn't go as far as to say bad. I think there is some good enough to make it a decent, pretty okay film. I love John Denver. That's all I can say. Right. Shout out to Merlin. What up, homeboy Merlin? Mark Strong. I love you. Anyways, that's how we're going to end the show today, guys. We're going to end it with Kingsman 2. Let us know your thoughts on Kingsman 2 since it is the most recent Matthew Vaughn film. Let us know in the comments what your favorite Matthew Vaughn film is and what you think he brings as far as Hollywood filmmakers go and what he brings as far as originality. I'm Ace. This is RB3. Please make sure you guys subscribe, like, share. If you like the Meaning of Podcasts, we're going to be here all the time. Let us know what filmmaker you want us to talk about, and we promise we will get to them eventually. That is it for today, guys. Talking about Matthew Vaughn. Peace out. Woo-hoo.